Ebenezer Domingo looked at himself in the office bathroom mirror and adjusted his tie, a cheap tie with barely noticeable coffee stains. In his 42 years, he looked 50. The bags under his eyes were a sign of sleep deprivation, and his thinning hair was a reminder of the mercilessness of time. Shaking off the invisible dust from the jacket he'd bought 5 years ago at a yard sale, he took a deep breath and walked out. The corridor of the First National South Los Angeles Bank greeted him with cold, air-conditioned air. Passing Livingston Hope's glass office, Ebenezer involuntarily slowed his step. His boss was on the phone, sprawled in a leather chair worth more than Ebenezer's monthly salary. Livingston was always smiling, always confident, always successful. Livingston noticed him and nodded affably. Ebenezer put on a polite smile and nodded back. "Domingo." Livingston looked out of his office, covering the receiver with his palm. "Come and see me in 10 minutes. We'll talk about your applications." "Of course, Mr. Hope." Ebenezer did his best to feign enthusiasm, though his insides clenched. He returned to his desk, which was littered with papers, and turned on his computer. His workstation was in a shared space with the other loan officers, with no hint of privacy. He was no worse than anyone else, but somehow fate smiled only on the likes of Livingston. Exactly 10 minutes later, Ebenezer knocked on the boss's office door. "Come in, Domingo." Livingston held out his hand for a handshake. An expensive watch gleamed on his wrist. "How are you doing? How's Kiora?" "I'm fine, sir." Ebenezer lied. "Kiora's fine, too." "Good." Livingston clapped him on the shoulder. "Listen, I've been going over your submissions from last month. You're behind schedule." Ebenezer gritted his teeth. "I've had some tough clients." "There are no difficult clients. There are insufficiently persuasive specialists." Livingston smiled, softening the harshness of his words. "Look at Gunnell. She's 30% over plan." "She has a richer neighborhood," Ebenezer remarked, immediately regretting his words. Livingston looked at him with barely concealed disappointment. "Excuses are for mediocrities, Domingo. I singled you out when I hired you for this position. Don't make me regret it." Ebenezer felt anger boiling up inside, but he kept his face. "I'll make it up to you, Mr. Hope. That's the spirit." Livingston smiled again. "By the way, we're having a big party for the staff next weekend. Lots of important people will be there. You and Kiora should come, relax, socialize." "I will, sir." Ebenezer lied. The last thing he wanted was to see his boss succeed after hours. That evening, Ebenezer drove the old Ford through the clogged roads of Los Angeles. The radio was reporting a new shooting in the southern part of the city, but he didn't care. The numbers were rolling around in his head: the mortgage, the electric bill, the health insurance. After 15 years on the job, he was still living from paycheck to paycheck. Their house in a middle-class suburb of Los Angeles was starting to deteriorate. The porch needed repair, the paint on the walls was peeling. The neighbors were slowly updating their homes, and he and Kiora were only falling into debt. When Ebenezer entered the house, he was met with silence. He peeked into the kitchen. No one. The living room was empty as well. Only in the bedroom did he see a note. "Gone to Nzinga's. Dinner is in the fridge. K." Ebenezer crumpled the note. Nzinga again. Kiora had been spending more and more time with this friend lately. Warming up a bland dinner, he sat down in front of the television. The business news channel was showing a story about the new millionaires of Los Angeles. Livingston Hope's face flashed among them. Ebenezer turned off the television. Kiora returned past midnight. Ebenezer lay in bed, but he was awake. He could hear her walking quietly around the room, taking off her jewelry, turning on the water in the bathtub. "Where have you been?" he asked when his wife lay down beside him. "At Nzinga's," I wrote. Kiora turned her back to him. "Until midnight? We watched a movie and then we got to talking. What's the big deal?" "You used to talk to me," Ebenezer remarked. Kiora turned to him. "What do I talk to you about, Eben? About how bad things are? About how you got told off by your boss again? Or how we haven't been able to afford a new car in 10 years? Her words hurt more than she could have imagined. "I'm trying," was all he could squeeze out. "I know," Kiora softened. "It's just that sometimes you want more." They were silent, and soon Kiora fell asleep while Ebenezer stared into the darkness for a long time. 15 years ago, when they had married, they had dreamed of a different life. Kiora wanted to open her own beauty parlor. He wanted to climb the career ladder. Now she was working as a receptionist at someone else's spa, and he was stuck in a loan officer position, swallowing humiliation from Livingston. In the morning, Kiora left earlier than usual. At breakfast, they barely exchanged a few phrases. Ebenezer noticed a new dress and earrings he had never seen on her before. "Nice earrings," he remarked. "These?" "Nzinga gave them to me for my birthday." Kiora looked away. "I'm late, I'll talk to you tonight." The door closed behind her, and Ebenezer was left alone. Kiora's birthday was 3 months ago, and she had not received any earrings from Nzinga then. He remembered every gift because he himself could only afford to buy her cheap perfume. At work, the day dragged on endlessly. Customers were unhappy with interest rates, documents were lost, the system froze. By lunchtime, Ebenezer's mood had plummeted to 0. In the dining room, he saw Livingston again, dining with some spectacular woman, both laughing. It seemed to Ebenezer that this was not a business meeting. Livingston was leaning too intimately toward his companion. Too frankly, she was touching his arm. As Ebenezer passed their table, Livingston caught his eye and winked. Something about the gesture made Ebenezer inwardly shudder. He was sure the boss was married. His wife's picture was on his desk. In the evening, when Ebenezer returned home, he found Kiora gone again. The note read, "Dinner with co-workers. Will be back late. K." Ebenezer crumpled the paper. Colleagues? What co-workers? In 5 years of working at the spa, Kiora had never once mentioned friendship with co-workers. He dialed her number, voicemail. Again, same thing. Tossing the phone on the couch, Ebenezer opened the fridge and pulled out a beer. 1, 2, 3. The alcohol dulled the growing anxiety and anger. He turned on the television, but couldn't concentrate on the program. His thoughts kept returning to Kiora, to her new earrings, to the constant meetings with Nzinga, to the late returns. His gaze fell on his wife's cell phone, forgotten on the table. Kiora never left her phone at home. Never. Ebenezer picked up the device, password protected. Of course it was. He tried her birthday. Unsuccessful. Her wedding date also failed. After the 5th attempt, the phone locked up for 30 minutes. Ebenezer set it aside and opened his beer again. Half an hour later, when the lock went down, he remembered that Kiora often used her childhood cat's name for passwords. Typing it in, the screen unlocked. His heart was pounding like crazy. Ebenezer had never gotten into his wife's phone before. It was against his principles. But now the principles had taken a back seat. Messages. Lots of correspondence with Nzinga. Nothing special. Spa work chat, discussing schedules, clients. Suddenly, a dialogue with an unknown number. No name, just numbers. Ebenezer opened the correspondence and felt the ground go from under his feet. Tomorrow at 10. Address is the same. Code is Crimson Moon. Pairing masks is mandatory. L. I will. I look forward to seeing you again. K. It's going to be especially hot this time. New contestants from San Diego. Make sure your husband doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy with his own problems to notice anything. Ebenezer leafed further. Dozens of messages over the past months. Encounters, cryptic phrases, code words. Mirror room, switch, quartet, watchers. And a picture of a luxurious mansion in the countryside, with the caption, "The place of meeting cannot be changed. I can't wait for Friday." Ebenezer zoomed in on the photo and froze. He knew this house, had seen it on the cover of Los Angeles luxury real estate magazine. The house belonged to Livingston Hope. It was like a bomb went off in his head. Kiora, his boss. Special parties. Pear masks. Switch. The phone slipped from his weakened fingers and fell to the floor. Ebenezer couldn't move. Rage, humiliation, pain, all mixed into one huge lump lodged somewhere between his heart and throat. He picked up his phone and continued reading, sinking deeper into the abyss with each message. A lot of things made sense now. The new jewelry, the late returns, the cooling of their relationship. The last message had been sent this morning. Confirm you're coming tomorrow. I have a special surprise for you. L. Confirmed. What's the theme for tonight? Secret desires. Masks, champagne, and no inhibitions. Waiting for you, my purple moon. Ebenezer turned off his phone and put it down just as he found it. Fury swam inside, but outwardly he was calm. Everything was falling into place now. The only question was what to do next. All the next day, Ebenezer could not concentrate on his work. The messages he read on Kiora's phone stood before his eyes. Crimson Moon. Special surprise. No inhibitions. Each word stung like acid, eating away at his dignity and self-respect from the inside out. Twice he had miscalculated interest rates for clients. By lunchtime, his head was buzzing with thoughts and sleep deprivation. "Domingo, you're not yourself today," Livingston remarked as he passed his desk. "Is everything all right?" Ebenezer looked up at his boss. Now, looking at his handsome face, expensive suit, and confident smile, he felt a physical pain that made him want to punch the man. "Everything's fine," he said. "Just a little family problem." "Family is sacred." Livingston patted him on the shoulder with his heavy hand. "By the way, I'll be leaving early today. I've got an event. Can you close my office at the end of the day?" "Of course, Mr. Hope." Livingston kept his hand on his shoulder longer than usual. "And, Domingo, take care of your beautiful wife. Such women are rare." At that moment, Ebenezer was sure his boss knew that he had seen the correspondence, that Livingston was enjoying his humiliation, playing with him like a cat with a mouse. When Livingston left, Ebenezer opened a map of the city on his computer and found the address of his boss's country home. He remembered it from a magazine article that praised it as a jewel of modern architecture reflecting the success of its owner. The luxurious mansion was 20 miles out of town, on a hill overlooking the ocean. Ebenezer called Kiora to verify his suspicions. "Hi." His wife's voice sounded strained. "Is something wrong? I was wondering when you'd be home tonight?" Pause. He could almost see her making up a lie. "There's a corporate party at the salon tonight," Kiora finally answered. "It will be late. Don't wait for me." "I see." He tried to speak evenly. "Have a good night." "Thank you, sweetheart. And Eben, don't stay out too late. You haven't been looking too good lately." The concern in her voice was genuine, and it made the betrayal all the more painful. At 6 p.m., Ebenezer left the office and got into his car. He didn't drive home. Instead, he drove toward the spa where Kiora worked and parked on the opposite side of the street. At 8:30 in the evening, he saw his wife coming out of the salon building. She was wearing a red tight dress he hadn't seen before. Her hair was styled, her makeup brighter than usual. Kiora got into a cab and Ebenezer followed, keeping his distance. The cab moved toward the exit from the city, confirming his worst fears. As the car pulled onto the highway leading to the upscale suburbs, he could almost physically feel something inside him snap. 40 minutes later, the cab stopped at a tall gate with guards. Ebenezer parked the car on the curb in the shade of the trees and watched Kiora show something to the guard. The gate opened and the cab pulled into the property. It was Livingston Hope's house. He recognized it by its distinctive curved roof and panoramic windows. The mansion shone with lights like a birthday cake, and about a dozen expensive cars were already parked in the parking lot in front of the house. Ebenezer couldn't just drive in. The guards wouldn't let him through. He circled the perimeter fence looking for a weak spot. In one place, Where the area bordered a small wooded slope, the fence was lower. Waiting until the guard was out of sight, he climbed over the fence, clinging to the branches of a nearby tree. Once on the property, Ebenezer moved toward the house, trying to stay in the shade of the trees. The house was built on a slope, and the first floor was at ground level on one side, while on the other it rose above the cliff, supported by piles. This created the effect of a structure floating above the ground. As he got closer, he saw that most of the rooms on the first floor were lighted, and the panoramic windows were not curtained. Apparently, Livingstone was so confident of the impregnability of his fortress that he had not bothered with curtains. Ebenezer crept to a side window and peered inside. What he saw made his heart clench. The spacious living room was filled with people, men in expensive suits, women in evening gowns. Many had masks on their faces, elaborate carnival masks with feathers and rhinestones. People were drinking champagne, laughing, dancing. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary party for the rich. But then Ebenezer noticed one of the men embracing two women at once, couples moving strangely, swapping partners. He moved along the wall of the house, peering through other windows. In the next room, the scene was even more revealing. Couches and armchairs were arranged in a semicircle, forming a sort of auditorium. In the center, a naked woman danced on a low table, and around her sat men and women, some already half naked. Ebenezer felt nausea rising to his throat. He looked for Kiora in the crowd, but had yet to see her. Moving to the next window, he found himself at a large room that resembled a home theater. There, a movie of unambiguous content was being shown on a huge screen, and several couples on couches were already repeating what they had seen. Suddenly, Ebenezer saw Livingston, his boss, standing in the center of the room in a burgundy velvet jacket, holding a glass in his hand. A group of guests had gathered around him, listening to him with admiration. Ebenezer had never seen his superior so relaxed and confident. And then he noticed Kiora. She was standing next to Livingston, wearing a red dress and a black mask with gold trim. The boss's hand rested on her waist possessively, intimately. Kiora laughed at something Livingston was saying, her eyes glittering. Ebenezer recoiled from the window as if from a blow. He knew, he suspected, but seeing with his own eyes was another matter. The blood pounded in his temples, and he was short of air. He squatted down, trying to cope with the dizziness. Coming to his senses, Ebenezer decided to wait for events to unfold. He found a spot in the garden where he had a good view of the living room and part of the other rooms, and lurked in the shade of the bushes. The night was warm, but he was shaking with an inner chill. Time passed. The party was becoming more and more explicit. People moved from room to room, sometimes disappearing in pairs or groups into side rooms. Ebenezer kept watching Kiora and Livingston the whole time. He saw them flirting, the boss whispering something in her ear, her laughing coquettishly. At some point, Ebenezer lost sight of them. He moved to another window, peered in, empty. Then to the next. There a group of strangers were busy with each other. Finally, he went to a large panoramic window overlooking the terrace on the other side of the house. What he saw there surpassed all his nightmares. On a wide couch under the soft light of the street lamps lay Kiora, his wife, the woman he had lived with for 15 years. And looming over her was Livingston, his boss, the man who had humiliated him day after day. They kissed, Livingston's hands sliding down Kiora's body, tugging up her dress. Ebenezer felt himself gasp. His fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms until they bled. He wanted to rush in there, break the glass, tear them both apart. But something held him back. Perhaps the last vestiges of self-preservation. He couldn't look at it, but he couldn't turn away either. Like hypnotized, he watched the betrayal, each second of which carved a new wound in his heart. When Livingston removed Kiora's dress and began to cover her body with kisses, Ebenezer finally turned away. He wandered away from the house, deep into the garden, unable to see the road. His head was empty, his chest a fiery ache. Ebenezer did not know how long he sat on the ground under a tree with his arms around his head. When he came to, it was past midnight. There was music coming from the house, but it was quieter. The party was still going on, but many of the guests seemed to have gone to separate rooms. Ebenezer stood up and walked slowly back toward the house. He didn't know what he was going to do himself. It was cold and empty inside, as if all senses had died out, leaving only a shell. As he approached the terrace, he saw that it was empty. Kiora and Livingston were no longer there. He looked around, trying to figure out where they might be. At that moment, the side door of the house opened and a woman stepped out onto the garden path. It was Kiora, alone. She was wearing the same red dress, but no longer wearing the mask. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged. She took a few steps and stopped, inhaling deeply of the night air. Then she took out a cigarette. Ebenezer didn't even know she smoked and lit it. He stepped out of the shade of the trees and stood on the path a few steps away from her. "Eben?" Kiora nearly dropped her cigarette when she saw her husband. How are you here? How long have you been sleeping with my boss?" His voice sounded strange even to him, calm, almost indifferent. Kiora was silent, holding her cigarette in her hand. "I'm asking," Ebenezer repeated, taking a step toward her. "How long have you been sleeping with Livingston?" "Eben, it's not what you think." She took a step back. "I can explain." "Explain?" Ebenezer felt a wave of rage rising inside. "What exactly do you want to explain? How you betrayed me with my boss? How you laughed behind my back?" "No, we weren't laughing." Kiora shook her head. "Livingston didn't even know I was your wife at first. I didn't tell him. And then he found out and just got excited, didn't he? What a coincidence. Fucking his subordinate's wife." Kiora threw down her cigarette and crushed it with her heel. "Look, Eben, let's not do this here. Let's go home. Let's talk calmly." "Calmly?" He grabbed her by the shoulders. "You think I can be calm after what I saw? You fucked him on that terrace like a whore?" "Let go!" Kiora broke free of his grip. "Yes, I'm sleeping with him. And not just with him. I'm living life to the fullest while you feel sorry for yourself and whine about your problems." Her words hit harder than her fist. "What? You heard her?" She looked at him defiantly. 15 years I've lived with a loser who only knows how to complain. My boss doesn't appreciate me. Life isn't fair. Everyone's against me. Do you know how tiring that is? I worked my ass off for us," Ebenezer whispered. "Don't be ridiculous," Kiora snorted scornfully. "You've been working like hell. You've been stuck in one place for 15 years. Livingston started out in the same position as you, and now he's got all this." She pointed to the mansion. "Because he's a man, not a whiner." Every word she said was like a stabbing blow. Ebenezer felt something dark rising from the depths of his soul. "So you found yourself a real man, have you?" He hissed. "Yes." Kiora lifted her chin. "Livingston is a man, and he's not the only one. Everyone here is a successful, strong man who makes the most of life. What do you have to offer? Evenings in front of the TV and complaining about your bosses? I loved you." Ebenezer took another step toward her. "For 15 years, I loved only you. That's not enough," she shook her head. "Love doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't give status. It doesn't give experiences. Look at you. You're an old, boring loser." Ebenezer felt something inside break. The last thread that connected him to his old life, to his old self, had broken. "And you're a whore," he whispered. "A dirty, corrupt whore. Better to be a happy whore than a miserable saint," Kiora grinned. "Now go away. Livingstone will be looking for me soon." She turned her back on him, the last humiliation, the last straw. Something clicked in Ebenezer's mind. It was as if the world around him was colored red. He lunged forward, grabbed Kiora by the shoulders, and spun her around. "You'll never be with him again," he wheezed. "Let go!" She tried to pull away. "Are you crazy?" His hands found their way to her neck. He squeezed and squeezed, unable to stop. Kiora wheezed, clawed at his hands, tried to scream, but couldn't. Her eyes widened with horror and incomprehension. Ebenezer squeezed harder, watching the life slowly leave the face of the woman he had once loved more than anything in the world. At some point, the resistance ceased. Kiora's body went limp and she settled to the ground. Only then did Ebenezer realize what he had done. He knelt beside his wife's body, trying to feel for a pulse. But Kiora's heart was no longer beating, and her eyes stared lifelessly into the starry sky. He had killed his wife. Kiora Domingo's body was discovered in the early morning hours by a gardener and a security guard at Livingston Hope Mansion. The woman was lying on the garden path among the bushes. Her red dress stood out as a bright spot against the green plants. Police and an ambulance were called, but the paramedics only pronounced her dead. Kiora had been dead for hours. In the chaos of the party, as guests moved from room to room, no one noticed her absence. Many couples were sequestered in different corners of the huge mansion, and the absence of one woman did not arouse suspicion. Livingston Hope, who was the last person to see Kiora alive, spent the rest of the night with another guest, without even remembering her. The Los Angeles Police Department dispatched a forensics team and Detective Amara Bamidele, an experienced major crimes investigator, to the scene. By 8 a.m., the area around Hope's home was cordoned off with police tape, and the partygoers who stayed the night were unable to leave the mansion. Detective Amara examined the body and the crime scene. Signs of a struggle, bruises on the victim's neck, and broken fingernails all pointed to a violent death by strangulation. "Looks like she knew her killer," Amara remarked, turning to the CSI. "No signs of sexual assault or robbery. Judging by the nature of the bruising on her neck, it's the work of a man," the CSI replied, examining the body. "Strong, large." "Make a list of all the guests," Amara ordered, turning to the police officer. "I want statements from everyone who was at that party." At that moment, Livingston Hope came to the scene, pale, puffy, with circles under his eyes, in a hastily thrown robe. "Detective, this is terrible." He shook his head. "I can't believe this happened in my house." "Mr. Hope," Amara looked at him carefully, "do you know the identity of the deceased?" Livingston nodded. "Kiora Domingo. She's a guest. She'd been to my parties." "Is that all?" Amara raised an eyebrow. Hope hesitated. "We were close, but it's unofficial." "I see." The detective made a note in her notebook. "When was the last time you saw her?" "Around midnight. We were together. Then she said she wanted to get some air. I stayed in the house, and then—" He spread his hands. "There were a lot of guests. I wondered if she was talking to someone, or what, Mr. Hope? Or she was alone with someone. At a party like this, it's, normal." Amara nodded, showing neither judgment nor approval. "I'll need a full guest list and their contacts." When Livingston left, Amara turned to the assistant. "Check her personal information. I need to know if she was married, if she has any relatives." Within an hour, police determined that the deceased was Kiora Domingo, 40 years old, worked as a receptionist at the Oasis Spa, and was married to Ebenezer Domingo, a loan officer at First National South Los Angeles Bank. Notably, Ebenezer Domingo worked at the same bank that Livingston Hope managed. "What a coincidence," Amara muttered as she studied the information. "Contact the husband. We need to let him know what happened and ask him some questions." At the same time, Ebenezer Domingo sat in the kitchen of his home, staring at one point. After the night's events, he had returned home, showered, burned the clothes he had been wearing at the time of the murder, and now waited for the inevitable to happen. He knew the police would be coming for him soon. The only question was whether they could find the evidence. The ringing of the phone made him wince. The number was unidentifiable. -- Hello? His voice sounded hoarse. "Mr. Domingo?" A woman's voice. "Detective Amara Bamidele, LAPD. I need to speak with you. It's about your wife. Ebenezer closed his eyes. This is it. Something wrong? He tried to put concern in his voice. Unfortunately, yes. I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Can you come down to the station? Of course, he swallowed. I'll be there in an hour. At the police station, Ebenezer was escorted to an interview room. Detective Amara entered a few minutes later, a tall woman with short hair and a penetrating gaze. Mr. Domingo. She sat down across from him. I am compelled to give you some sad news. The body of your wife, Kiora Domingo, was discovered this morning. I am very sorry. Ebenezer covered his face with his hands. He didn't need to pretend. The grief and shock he was feeling were real. He had truly loved Kiora, despite her betrayal. A part of his soul had died with her that night. How did this happen? He whispered. Your wife was strangled. It happened in the garden of Livingston Hope's country house. Do you know anything about that place? Ebenezer shook his head. No. I mean, I know Mr. Hope has a country house, but I've never been there. Did you know your wife had been there? What? No, of course not. He gave me a puzzled look. She told me she was having a corporate retreat at the salon. Amara studied his reaction. Mr. Domingo, your wife was at a party at your boss's house. A special party of an intimate nature. You didn't know anything about it? Ebenezer turned pale. No, he whispered. There must be some mistake. Kiora couldn't have. We have testimony from multiple people confirming her presence there, Amara said softly. And not just yesterday. She attended these events regularly. Ebenezer remained silent, staring at the table. Mr. Domingo, the detective continued. Where were you last night, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.? At home, he looked up. I was home alone. I watched TV, then I went to bed. Can anyone confirm that? No, I said I was alone. Amara nodded, making a note in her notebook. Have you ever been to Livingston Hope's country house? No, never. How has your relationship with your wife been lately? Ebenezer paused. It was all right. Like everyone else after 15 years of marriage, it's been better and worse. And how was your relationship with your boss? He tensed. Livingston? Working. He's my boss. Just your boss, not a friend? No, not a friend. The detective asked a dozen more questions and then let him go, taking a promise not to leave town and to stay in touch. As he left the station, Ebenezer felt panic overwhelm him. They suspect him, it's obvious, but they have no proof. Not yet. Over the next few days, Detective Amara methodically interviewed all the party guests and collected evidence. No one saw Kiora leave the house. No one saw her in the garden with anyone. But one of the guards recalled noticing a suspicious figure near the fence late at night. Someone possibly climbing over the fence. On the fourth day of the investigation, Amara called Livingston Hope in for formal questioning. Mr. Hope, she began, you claim you were merely intimate with Kiora Domingo, but witnesses say you've been lovers for over 6 months. Livingston squirmed in his chair. Yes, we were. We had been seeing each other. And yet you were aware that she was your subordinate's wife? Not at first, he looked away. When I met her, I didn't know she was married to Domingo. She gave her maiden name. Then, when I found out, it was too late. Too late? We were infatuated with each other, Hope explained. I know it sounds awful, but Kiora was unhappily married. She said that Ebenezer didn't understand her, that he was always complaining about life, that he was boring. Amara made a note. And you decided to comfort her? At first, yes. Then I introduced her to other people, our circle. Kiora was very open to new experiences. By circle, you mean the swingers? Livingston nodded. It's a closed community of free adults. Everyone comes voluntarily, everyone follows the rules. And one of the rules is that you don't tell your spouses anything? Many of the members are single or divorced, Hope replied evasively. Those who are married, that's their own business. Mr. Hope, did you know that Kiora's husband suspected something? No, Livingston shook his head. Kiora said he didn't notice anything, that he was completely immersed in his work and his problems. When was the last time you saw Ebenezer Domingo before the murder? In the office. In the afternoon. He looked, normal. A little distracted, maybe. After interviewing Livingstone, Detective Amara met with Nzinga Onyeka, a close friend of the deceased. Nzinga turned out to be a tall, elegant woman with short hair and bright lipstick. She was devastated by her friend's death, but kept herself collected. Ms. Onyeka, were you close to Kiora Domingo? Yes, we were friends for several years, Nzinga nodded. We met at the spa where she worked. Were you aware of her relationship with Livingstone Hope? Nzinga sighed. Yes. She told me about it about 8 months ago. I discouraged her at first, but then... Kiora seemed happy, for the first time in years. What do you know about her relationship with her husband? They've cooled off, Nzinga shrugged. Kiora said Ebenezer was no longer the man she married. He became embittered, always complaining about life, about work, about how everyone was lucky except him. Did he ever show aggression? Nzinga hesitated. Not physical aggression, but he could be resentful. Kiora said he often snapped at her when he had problems at work. Did Kiora ever mention that she was afraid of her husband? No, she didn't. It was more like she was homesick for him. But Nzinga hesitated. The day before she died, she called me. She said she had a strange feeling, that Ebenezer was acting differently, as if he knew something. What was it? She wasn't specific. She just said he'd been asking questions about her business dinners and seeing her friends. He wasn't interested before. Detective Amara cross-referenced all the statements. In the evening, she received the results of the forensics. They found skin particles under Kiora's fingernails that could have belonged to the killer. Forensics was able to isolate the DNA. I need a warrant for a DNA sample from Ebenezer Domingo, she told her colleague. And check the security cameras in the area of Hope's house. Someone's car may have flashed there the night of the murder. On the 5th day of the investigation, the detective received the results of her analysis of traffic camera footage. One of them showed Ebenezer Domingo's car traveling in the direction of Hope's house an hour before the alleged time of the murder. With this evidence, Amara obtained a search warrant for Domingo's house. In an ashtray in the backyard, forensic investigators found charred remnants of clothing with what looked like blood. Ebenezer was called to the station and presented with a warrant to obtain a DNA sample. He turned pale, but complied. As the nurse swabbed the inside of his cheek, Detective Amara watched him closely. "Mr. Domingo," she said when the nurse left, "your car was spotted outside Mr. Hope's house the night of the murder. How do you explain that?" Ebenezer remained silent, staring at the floor. "We also found charred remnants of clothing in your yard. Why did you burn the clothes, Mr. Domingo?" "I want a lawyer," Ebenezer finally said. DNA results came back a day later. The genetic material under Kiora's fingernails matched Ebenezer's DNA. They also found traces of the victim's blood on the burned clothing remnants. Ebenezer Domingo was arrested on suspicion of murdering his wife. He was led out of the house in handcuffs and placed in a police car. Neighbors watched the scene in silence. As the car moved, Detective Amara Bamadel looked at the arrested man through the rearview mirror. "Why?" she asked. "Why didn't you just divorce her?" Ebenezer looked up. "Have you ever felt that your whole life is a lie?" he asked quietly. 15 years. All for nothing. She laughed at me. They were both laughing. "Is that why you killed her?" Ebenezer turned away, staring out the window at the city rushing by. "I didn't want to. I just wanted to talk. But she said I was a loser. That Livingston was a real man, and I wasn't." "And you couldn't handle it?" I lived for her for 15 years, Ebenezer whispered. Everything I did was for her. And she betrayed me with my boss, with the man who humiliated me every day. Detective Amara didn't say anything. The car drove through the streets of Los Angeles, taking Ebenezer Domingo to where he was to spend many years, perhaps the rest of his life.